We really appreciate you all being here for this important release on workplace sexual harassment of women journalists in China. While the Me Too movement has shed light on workplace sexual misconduct, particularly in the West and at various news organizations at that, we haven't seen such revelations as much here on this side of the continent. So to get an idea of the scope of the issue in China, we're honored to have our speakers, Tingting from the Executive Director of Guangzhou Gender and Sexuality Education Center, as well as journalist Sophina, Huang, Chen, to talk about their recent research on this topic. I like to bear in mind that this is something they've been working on in recent years. Last year, they did this groundbreaking report on sexual harassment on university campuses in China that led to some resignations at various academic institutions, and now their focus is on sexual harassment of female reporters at newsrooms, and they're also going to discuss solutions for change. Let's hear what they have to say. Everyone give a warm welcome to Tingting and Sophina Huang. Tingting, do you want to go first?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. First, I want to introduce myself. I'm Tingting Wei, and I'm the director of Guangzhou Gender and Sexuality Education Center. And I want to give you a very briefly introduce of my organization. My organization is a very new organization in Guangzhou, and it works better. Okay, good. So it's a quite new and young organization which was founded in 2016. And at the first beginning, when we started, the main idea is to do something about the sexual violence and gender-based violence. So in 2017, we start a research about about sexual harassment in Chinese college campus. But what we find out is around 69.3% of the students or graduates have been subject to different degree of sexual harassment. So this data is quite shock, and we collect over 6,500 valid response from all 34 provinces in China. So we find out this data, and let me share to you another data. Only 5.4% of the college have sexual harassment prevention program, and the less of the 4% of the victim will go to report it to the police or to the college. So which means if there is 1,000 cases about sexual harassment, only 4 of them can be reported to police or to the college staff or the teachers in university. So it's what we find out. It's quite serious in this year, and after this year's movement, so then we start our NASHA program, which is the Network of Anti-Sexual Harassment and Abuse. So there's some, very briefly introduce about what we're gonna do and what we have done in last year. In 2017, we have a report about sexual harassment situation in university, and today, and we work with Sophia together to launch the new report about journalists situation, about the sexual harassment situation in journalists. And in 2017, we also trained gender-friendly lawyer and mental health consultant to help the victims and service. Also, in the education and the workers' work, we have done some, 6 events and campers, and we also joined the Me Too movement in China since the beginning of this year. Personally, I'm graduate from Wuhan University, so I work with other university students. We wrote together about we wrote letters and petition and emails to the principal of university to ask for the mechanism to prevent sexual harassment in universities. And we also applied disclosure of government information to 113 universities to ask the data about sexual harassment situation and ask if there is any mechanism about prevent sexual harassment in university. But what we find out is none of the university have the seriously or complex mechanism to prevent sexual harassment. So there's some briefly data about what we have done. And then I will pass on Sophia about the new report will be found. Yeah, and maybe we can talk later.
So because I also have been through some workplace sexual harassment in my journalism life, so I was kind of shocked and feel angry after the incidents. So I was thinking, like, is that just happened to me by myself? And I attended a fellowship last year in Singapore. Actually, I met like 16 journalists from 16 journalists from 13 countries, and 9 female journalists told me, 5 of 9 female journalists told me they've also been subjected to different kinds of sexual harassment in their life when they are doing journalism. So I feel like it's quite serious problem here. So when I was in Singapore, the Me Too also took place. It's like everywhere. So in Singapore, I go out on the street, talk to the strangers, and take photos of Me Too. And then people write about my story. And when I go back to China in October last year, I was thinking to start a Me Too in China too. But because the Chinese people are so conservative, none of the female journalists said, okay, I'm going to do it with me. So I feel like I need to do it in a different way because people doesn't want to go in public to talk about their story. So I said like, okay, what kind of way are you guys going to talk? Are you willing to talk to me? So I was thinking like to do an online survey. So that's how this report comes on. So I designed a survey and I passed to all the female journalists I know and to a lot of news organizations. And they actually are willing to do all these surveys. So that's how this report comes out. So this survey actually lasts for a month, over a month, started from 2017, October 20. At that time, I had created a platform named Anti-Sexual Harassment, ATSH, which was blocked now. And then to share my personal story about being sexual harassed by a senior journalist, and then ask them, encourage them to also write their story to me. So that's the platform for victims to share their personal stories. And also to have this report. So this report actually reached 1,762 respondents from 15 provinces, which is like including the first-time cities in mainland China like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and some other well-developed provinces like Zhejiang or Zhejiang, Jiangsu province. So I got 416 valid samples, which means most of all of them finish all the questionnaire and they are not repeat ID. So 416 was valid samples. And from the survey, you can see that 83.7, that is like 348 of female journalists has been subjected to sexual harassment in different kinds and forms. So just 60.3 said they had never been sexual harassed or assaulted by the other people. And you can see 42.4% of them actually has been through sexual harassment 2 to 4 times. And you can see 18.2 of them has been sexual harassed for 5 times or more. So I cannot say that that is very correct because this sample might just reach the victims, and only the victims are willing to write this survey to finish all the questionnaire. Some of them might not. So I cannot say it's quite accurate, but that means it's really serious too, even it doesn't reach 83.7%. Okay. So who are they? Who are the sex offender? So there's a question like ask them who are they? What's the relationship between you and the sex offender? And they said more than 90% of the perpetrators are male, and among them 40.9% are the victims' authoritative leaders, like their leaders, from the department or from the newspaper or newsrooms. And 30% of them are colleagues, and 37.1% are strangers, and also 17.3% of the sex offender are the interviewee. Like we need to go to interview a lot of people, some of them. And in the report, I'm sorry it doesn't written in all English, there are a lot of stories shared there. Like when they said they want to share their story, they write it in detail. So you can see interviewee also can be the sex offender for the journalists, for female journalists. And we need to interview different kinds of people, approach different kinds of people. So that's quite like had the more potential for female journalists to have been sexual harassed. Also, how they respond after they were sexual harassed, after we were that. So you can see like more than 50%, actually it's 57.3% of the victims keep silent and back off and just never tell anyone. And personally, asked to stop, the people is like 25%, and just 3.2% of us will report it to HR or supervisor, and even less people, like 0.6% will call the police, and 2.5% will resign or change the jobs. So after all the samples, it's just only 2 out of 348 victims choose to go to the police to make a report. It's kind of like not easy for females, for us to go to make a report, especially go to the police station, because sometimes we fear of the retaliations, we fear of the bad reputations of female, and we also afraid that if you disclose our privacy, also we lack the solid evidence that like it's not easy to make a case if you don't have evidence when you go to the policeman or go to the HR or supervisor. So that's how we respond. So the first reaction when we were like having sexual harassed, like most of us, even for me too, we feel like we just dumbstruck. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to react. So you can see that 48.6% of victims do not know how to resist, and to 21.3% of us, we don't have the solid evidence. That's also the reason. And it also had a big bad influence in our career and lives. In like people will think that we feel ashamed, we don't want this happen to us, because it's really not something we should be proud of or we are proud of. So that means almost 50% of us do not know the ways to resist and to react to workplace sexual harassment. That's the key reason we don't know. So that's why we don't report to the police station or HR. And what will happen after this? When I talk to a lot of victims, even for myself, we feel like there is a decline in self-esteem. We don't really trust ourselves. We don't have that confidence anymore. We feel like, okay, why you do that to me? And we keep asking questions for us. We don't really blame the victim at the first reaction. For myself, when it happened to me, I was asking myself what happened and why it happened to me, why he did that to me. So I blame myself first. So that's also the same case for a lot of victims. And you can see they had 27% of victims said they had severe impact on the personal relationship and their social life. And a lot of people, like 25% of victims had suffer depression and a lot of pressure, PTSD after having been sexually harassed. And there are also 5.6% of the victims will have self-harm or suicide tendency. So among all the victims who I talked to them, and I also had the question like how many times you have been sexually harassed, and so among the 172 victims who said they has been encountered sexual harassment in to 2 to 4 times, 44 of them said it brought severe impact on their personal relationship and the social life. 22 of them resigned after being sexually harassed or changed their position in the newsroom, and 29 suffer from mental distress and very serious one. That's what I mean, like the depression. And 10 of them has self-harmed and sometimes they want to suicide. That is quite a serious situation when I talk to them. Some of them even quite a few times. So the reality, I feel like the reason we don't really know how to react because we lack of some training or some education about sex or sex education or sexual harassment, things like that. So I asked them, do you guys need some anti-sexual harassment training? And nearly 75% expressed strong need for anti-sexual harassment trainings and lectures in the workplace. Like we don't really have. I had to say that. And you can see, the reality is like 84.3% of us do not have any anti-sexual harassment training when we go to the press or when we join the workplace. So also there are also 12.7% of people like they had no idea whether they had such kind of training in the workplace. So only 3% of respondents that they receive anti-sexual harassment lectures or they have obtained some related information provided by their workplace. And I think this data is quite true. And even before I finished this report, I talked to a lot of newsroom or news organizations in mainland China. I approached 32 of them, and none of them told me they had such anti-sexual harassment trainings, lectures. And even I also talked to 13 foreign outlets in mainland China, like BBC, Guardians, like VOA, CNN. And I was asking, like, do you guys have such kind of sexual harassment lectures or trainings or some papers, some regulations, which we can draw some lessons from you guys? And actually, so far, the pity is none of them, even for the foreign news outlet, they said, we don't really have this kind of training. But only one of the foreign news outlet told me that they received an email from the office, like ask they to pay attention to sexual harassment in the newsroom. That's the only one foreign outlet. So it's the same situation. Even for us, for the newsroom, it's like we are kind of an empowerment unit, right? So we are journalists supposed to be more sensitive, more resourceful. We are more fearless when we defend other people's rights. But when it comes to us, we also keep silence. And even our newsroom in mainland China or outside mainland China, there's not a lot of them had such anti-sexual harassment lectures or trainings. That's the same situation for every industry, even in media. So after talking to all of them, there's some advice I draw from the survey. So this kind of we need to introduce workplace anti-sexual harassment mechanism into the campus, not just campus, but also for all the workplaces. So I think the prevention and education is needed, is strongly needed because we don't really have that much prevention and education because that's some things is kind of still a taboo for Chinese people to talk about. It's absolutely not a topic you are going to talk with your parents, so we don't get the education from family. And even in a university, there's not that much about sex education. Maybe in the college, they have some more now. So I think the training session is needed, and the lectures or seminars for the new employees or for every monthly or seasonal meetings. So these kind of things should introduce into the workplace. And I also think that we need to have investigation after the complaints. So we will need a very special department, not just HR department. So set up related departments to handle issues like this. So handling the issues should be pay attention to the confidential consulting, because lots of victims actually suffer PTSD after this. So, and also punishment of the sexual offenders. That is a very important one, I think, because the senior journalists must know now, prepared to take their reputation on the fair, safe places. They're supposed to provide some fair, safe workplace for all the employees. So I think that they should need to, the employer, the boss of the or the industry or companies should bear some joint liability if some employees in the company was making case like that. They need to bear some joint liability, like they need to get them their job, they need to resign. So that means they will pay more attention to it, they will take it seriously. So I also think that it need to introduce the workplace anti-sexual harassment regulations, even not writing into the law, but regulations are needed in the companies. So I also think the collaborations or cooperations with the police force, consulting centers, and anti-sexual harassment organizations like the Guangzhou Sex Education Center, something like that. We really need that. I figured out that in mainland China, we don't have any of it. Like, we are thinking to introduce some training or some course now into the campus or into the workplace, but we cannot find any such related training in China. We don't have things like that, like a good training or course. So, yeah, that's all about the report. So, all the questions. Thank you for listening. All the questions are welcome. Thank you.
Could you please describe what the government's position currently is regarding sexual harassment in the workplace, not just for journalists, but more generally in the workplace? And are you seeing any changes when it comes to the government's approach to this issue?
Okay, thank you for the questions. And I think because, sexual harassment, even in China, why the government had to play a bigger role, there are a lot of space for them to improve. Because in China, even we're talking about sexual harassment, this word is still new to us. Like, we don't have a clear definition about sexual harassment. Yeah, we had the law like sexual harassment should not happen in the workplace, but what kind of activities or what kind of things are sexual harassment? So we don't have the law here. So the government should allow people to talk about it, allow the lawyers or the experts to study about it, and to have a law, introduce a law to make a very clear definition of the sexual harassment. And actually, I think the government is quite positive about this situation, because when Me Too happened in mainland China, especially when we made a case about a professor in campus, and he was like turned down, and then he cannot teach the student anymore. So, and then the Ministry of Education agreed that they need to introduce the anti-sexual harassment mechanism into the campus, and that the Ministry of Education actually represent the government, so they're welcoming this. But they also feel like they don't like all the students to stand up to ask for it. But I think they are quite open now compared to before. So they receive all our, we get a lot of studies from other universities from abroad, like in the United States or even in Korea, in Australia. And the government, they receive all the materials we collect. So they think they said they are going to study it, and they are going to introduce such mechanism into the campus. But about the workplace, I don't see a lot of changes right now in Chinese workplace. Because even the sexual harassment in the workplace is still not a lot of people talking about it. Me Too in China is kind of happening in the campus, in the universities, not in the workplace yet. So still a lot of work needs to be done.
Another question, there's a lady at the front.
Oh, okay. Hi, this is Catherine from Hong Kong Free Press. Sophia, could you talk a bit about whether you've met with any censorship attempts to block your your work on this issue?
Okay. Yeah. They still have. Yeah. I mean, in China, we still have censorship. Even I post articles about sexual harassment or about the report, and my personal account and my public account ATSH was blocked by the government, but not because of the sexual harassment issue, but because I made some comments, write some article to question the amendments of the constitution. So that's not related. But I think that's about the censorship in China about sexual harassment. The government doesn't really censor articles or case about sexual harassment happening. They will censor a movement which was well organized or organized by a group of people. They fear of something like that. They don't fear that we made a case, but they fear students come together or journalists come together or the people come together to organize a large groups or activities at the same time. Like I also write a joint proposal to the Beihang University, which the case was break, talking about the professor. So and then a lot of students join us to back us up, and they have more than 90 universities, right? They more than 90 universities, students from them, like more than 8,000 students, write the joint proposal to their own universities, like we need to introduce such anti-sexual harassment mechanism into our campus. That's what the government will censor. They censor like groups of people are doing the same thing at the same time. They will fear some schemes there. So that's what they censor. But about the articles, about the other stuff, they don't censor that much. So, but my personal account and my platform was blocked, not because of sexual harassment issue, but because of my other articles. Yeah, so.
Any more questions?
Hello, I'm Karen Coe. I'm a freelance journalist. One of the difficult things, I think, if you can't prevent sexual harassment is, of course, consequences.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
what you call punishment in
Yeah.
your presentation. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on what do people in China think is appropriate. For example, in Hong Kong, sexual harassment is governed by the Equal Opportunities Commission. There's no punishment. So there's no deterrent for someone to harass, and generally cases are encouraged to arbitrate. You know, you sit in a room and you say sorry and you say I won't do it again, but there's usually no real punishment for the perpetrators. What's your view on, you know, what is appropriate sort of punishment, if you
I
like?
think that depends on the different, the real situation, because some of them, if they repeat again, they repeat, because you can see from the survey, right? Like they had more, 42.2 of them has encountered sexual harassment more than 2 times. It's 2 to 4 times. But I'm not sure it's the same person or the different person. If they are the same person, I mean, that's a criminal, like a repeated criminal. So they really need to be like resign from their job. They had to, like they need to be punished. Like you don't, like the professor we talked about in the university. So he cannot teach and he cannot do the teaching anymore. So he had to resign from his job as a professor and as a teacher. So they don't have ways for him to get touch or approach other students anymore. So I think if they are repeated sex offender, they need to have something like that, like, okay, you are never going to be a journalist anymore. You can never take this job or working in this field or working in this area, in this industry anymore. I think that would be needed if they are repeated offenses. Because if they are one-time thing, maybe a proper sorry, announcement sorry, also depends on what kind of sexual harassment. It's like something almost come to the rape. It's a different story, right? But if just like some jokes or some unwelcome touch, like, but really depends on very different situations. If it's come to very serious one, they need to be punished. Like you need to apologize in public place, and you need to write something in the newspaper to say that, oh, I'm sorry I do this, and then I will not do it again. And you also need to have the to find the forgiveness from the victims. So yeah, that's what I think.
Another question at the back.
Hi, I'm Nicole from the Financial Times. I really appreciate your report very much. I wonder, do you see any trend in the media organization that are particularly expose their journalists to like sexual harassment in workplace, or like any trend, like for example magazines or freelance journalists or like whatsoever, or which city? Like, I just want to see whether are there any trends. Thank you.
Actually, when I do this report and when Me Too was like everywhere in the world, I was thinking it will echoes in mainland China too, especially in the news industry. But I don't see that trend actually. People still, I think that's one reason. I was thinking like the journalists in mainland China still are very proud of our job. We are very proud to be a journalist. We feel like we are more resourceful or more sensitive. We are more fearless. We defend other people's rights. But it really, when it comes to us, we feel like there's a pride there. You know, when I talk to a lot of victims, like why you don't stand up and speak out at that time or now after a few years. Most of them, like, it's already a few years ago. They feel like I feel ashamed of myself, and I feel like I was the one people respect. If I talk about this, it will not just only ruin their career, ruin the life, the personal life. It still made me feel I need to keep the pride. So there's not a lot of people really willing to talk about it with me. But if they, okay, I can say that you can see I reached 1,762 journalists, just 416 are valid samples, and just 89 female journalists are willing to share their story, and 39 of them actually write to me in detail. And when I asked, would you like to go on public? Would you like to take a Me Too, or would you like to talk to it in the public place? I said, no, please don't, because I already get married. I already had a husband. I had a concern about my family, how they will think, how will they react, how can I talk to my kids? I'm not just a journalist right now. I'm also a mother, a wife. So they think a lot in China. You are not like, I just stand there representing only myself. So even in the magazine or newsroom, in the news industry, not a lot of people are really eager to come out to talk. So the trend is still not going that far away. People still keep the same. Even they realize it's a serious situation. They also know that if you don't speak, if we keep silence, the bad circle will go on and go on, because we don't speak, and the perpetrator think that, okay, they're not, they don't have the nerve, they don't have the courage to spit it out, so they can repeat it again. So they know that's a bad circle, but still very difficult for them to say like, okay, me too, I have suffered this, and this is the guy did it to me. Still very difficult. So I don't see a lot of changes are coming right now. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? Lady at the front.
Thank you so much for the report. I just have one question. So you mentioned a couple times that you had 1,762 valid responses, or responses. I was just wondering, how do you differentiate the valid from the invalid to get to 416?
Okay.
And did you use primarily your own network to find all these journalists, or did you email sort of the company and ask them? Because I've been to some other reports in China about like domestic violence, and they actually had way less responses.
Yeah, correct.
This seems like a lot.
Yeah. I know. I actually like. I know a lot of female journalists, so I have the data here. How I approach them. So I have written down that how I do this survey, right? So in 2000, we had a WeChat QQ group or virtual group. I had more than 10 of them, and every group has more than almost 500 journalists there. So I distribute the survey to there, and I talk to the people in charge of the group, like, okay, this is the survey about female journalists being sexual harassed. Would you like help me to send to all the female journalists? So personally, I sent to 6 of them. That already 2,000 journalists there. And I also sent to QQ group. There are more than 1,000 journalists there. And I also sent to them personally by myself. It's 207 journalists. And I also sent by, this is by the WeChat. So I have all the count data. And I sent to 39 female journalists by email. Yeah. So, and then these are all the people I can reach, because you can. I had the online survey, so they had the data to show how many people reach this the questionnaire, how many of them are doing that. But after the valid one, it's like they had some people maybe do it twice or 3 times, because I didn't set up that one ID can do it once. So some of them do it twice or 3 times. So I select all of them. So delete the same ID, and some of them talk to me like after the questionnaire, they said, "Oh, Sophia, I'm not feeling well to do it again," so they would like to withdraw them. So it's okay. I also withdraw it. So after all these, and some of them are not journalists. So when they choose they are not journalists, I also delete them. So this is quite like reach all the people. It's quite specific groups of female journalists here. Even some of my friends, I would like to do the question, but I saw as a female journalist, I'm male journalist, so I quit. So it's quite like I go to a very specific groups of people. A lot of people helping me to express this survey. So those people are quite accurate. So after all of that, it's like just 416. Yeah.
Any more questions from the floor? Thank you for
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. And if you give us your email address, maybe we can send you the PhD online.